Hello everyone. Let's talk about Parashat Shavua. So we cannot understand the Torah without the commentaries, okay? So without, who is the most famous commentator out there? It's Rashi. There is no way to understand the the Parashiot every week without reading Rashi. And that's why it's better when you learn Torah to learn it in the original Hebrew and to have a Rashi, or if not, to have a translation in English that has Rashi, because that's the only way to actually understand the meaning behind everything. So I want to show you an idea of this Parashat Shavua, according to Rabbi David Furman, who is I really love to listen to him. And he is explaining this very well. This week's parasha, it's a welcome to the book of Shmot, the book of names. But it's a very strange name for a book in the Torah, yeah? The names show up in the beginning of this book. These are the names of the children of Jacob that came down to Egypt, and then the Torah goes ahead and lists all the children of Jacob. But we wonder, is that a good enough reason to name a whole book Shmot, okay? The strange thing is that the translation in English of this book, it's actually the book of Exodus, from which that sound more appropriate for this book, because everything that happens in this book has to do with the Exodus of Egypt. Yes, the dominant event that happened in this book. But the Hebrew is the book of name. In the Hebrew, it's the book of names. So what is the secret behind this name? Yeah. A profound answer can be found in the first comment made by the Rashi. If we read Rashi, we'll understand also the meaning behind everything. We know that the Torah can be explained in four ways. Yes, Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, the Pardes. Yeah, so Rashi, it's explaining usually according to the Pshat, according to the Midrash. So Rashi looks at the list of names of the people who came down from Egypt, and he wonders why the list was even necessary at all. Turns out that way back in the book of Genesis, the Torah has actually told us this already. These are the names of the children of Israel that came down to Egypt, Jacob and his descendants. The Torah uses exactly the same words used in this parasha. So Rashi's question is actually pretty good. We heard this already. Why do we have to repeat it? Why do we have to say it again? So the answer to this question, Rashi is bringing a midrash. That midrash says like this: even though it is true that the Torah counted the children of Jacob in their lifetimes and have given their names way back in the book of Genesis, still the Torah went back in Exodus and counted them again when that generation were dying out. Yes, we know that we started talking about the children of Israel and suddenly we're a slave in Egypt and everything happens. To let us know how dear they were to Hashem, like we're counting stars. Because the children of Israel, they are compared to the stars. And we know that when we come to the stars, God brings them out every evening and returns them back to their places by number and by name. As the verse in Isaiah says, God takes out all the stars according to their number, and all of them he calls by name. So of course, it's like a puzzle, what Rashi tells us here. He seems to think that everything will make sense. The stars get names, so we get name. So what's the connection? What is the Midrash trying to tell us here? The Midrash is alluding to something very deep. The Midrash says that the key to understanding the naming of Israel in the beginning of Exodus is to remember that Israel is compared to the stars exactly when, but when did that happen? When we were compared to the stars? Yeah, the answer that it happened in the time of Abraham. If you remember, back in Genesis chapter 15, Abraham was worried that he was old and he will pass away and he will not have children. And who is going to carry on his legacy? And in response to that, Hashem tells him to go outside, look towards the heaven and count the stars if he's able to count them. And he added, so shall your offspring be. But isn't that interesting? Because the moment Hashem first associated the children of Israel with stars, that turns out to be the moment God brings up the idea of counting them. Which brings us, like he's telling them, yeah, look at the stars and count. Can you count them? Are you able to count them? So this is already very similar, which brings us straight to a fascinating paradox, because when God actually told Abraham the nation of Israel was going to be like stars, God points out that Abraham would be the stars will be impossible to count. Yeah, the offspring will be impossible to count. But now here comes the Midrash, this rabbinic text, the specific references that promise that Israel is going to be like the stars, and what the Midrash makes of it. That God, as a tone of love, treats us just like the stars and counts each one of us. But wait a minute. Are we countable like the Midrash suggests, or uncountable like the stars, like God told Abraham? So according to Rabbi Furman, the answer is, who is doing the counting? When it comes to stars, it seems innumerable to people. People look up at the heavens and they get dizzy. But not Hashem, not God. God has the opposite relationship to stars. The book of Isaiah tells us he counts every one. He names in the Midrash, every one of the stars, and the Midrash sees in that naming and counting signs of affection, a sign of love. So it's like a teacher that is in a class and knows each person that is in that class, and if someone is missing, he knows that person is missing. So that shows us how loved the students are. So Hashem, it's telling Abraham that his progeny will get too numerous to count, and they are going to be like stars. But historically, exactly when was that moment? And the answer is, interesting enough, right here, right in this moment, in this parasha, in time. And if you're focusing right here in the beginning of the Exodus, because right after the Torah goes and counts the children of Israel, right after that, the next thing we hear about it is a population explosion. And the Israeli were fertile, and they were swarm. They will multiply and increase very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. So this is the moment God was talking about. The moment Israel burst forth and transformed itself from mere family into an incipient nation. From a family to a nation. This is the moment they become innumerable. And once you realize that, you realize something very chilly, because at that moment, something else was happening too. Something foretold to Abraham the moment after God told him his children will be like stars. So you should know, your children will be strangers in a strange land, and the people of that land will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. When you read that verse in Genesis, you don't exactly know when it's going to happen. But the reader of the book of Exodus knows Abraham's entire prophecy comes true right at the beginning of the Sefer Shmot. Right after Abraham's children have become like the stars, right after that they become enslaved. Now this is what the Midrash that Rashi cites. Your people, Abraham, are so innumerable, they will be just like the stars. It seems like a great blessing, and it is. But that blessing came coupled with something tragic, the darkness moment in your young history. The moment when those multitudes would be enslaved. In those 400 years of slavery, it seems like we are out of favor with God, that he didn't really love us, that what happened to us was just in the hands of fate or chance, that no one really cared about us. That, the Midrash is suggesting, is the reason that right before that slavery happens, right then, Hashem pauses to count us and to name us. God does it because after all, to him, we're just like the stars. God seems to be saying, yes, I can understand why you think you don't matter, why you think you are all alone in the cold and carry universe. This is after all the moment you become like stars, and people don't count stars, people don't name them. But stars are one of those things that God and people see differently. You see, God does count the stars. God even names them. He does this because they are dear to him, and so it is with you. God doesn't see you as a nation of nameless faces. Each and every one of you is important to him. He counts each and every one of us as we live, and then again he counts us as we seem to melt and die away. He names us because he loves us. After seeing this midrash and beginning to understand what it might be alluding to, I feel we can also understand why the name of this book of the Torah is names, Shmot. Yeah, for what really happened is this book. It is, of course, the book that recounts our experience as slaves. And when things seem darkest, most hopeless, It recounts the story of a God who appears to Moses and says to him, in the middle of a burning bush, I see you suffering. I hear your cries. I've been with you all along. Isn't it interesting that this is how God starts the conversation with Moses? Not just, I'm going to deliver you from the slavery, but before all that, I have seen your pain. I have heard their cries. That's the first thing you need to know is I get it. I'm with you. I know what you're going through. I know your names. I think calling the book names is not an attempt to have a discussion of Egyptians' enslavement, but it is itself a way of talking about that enslavement. Through it all, God knows our names. He cares about each and every one of us. Is all our pain, in all our pain, in all our anguish, for we are after all like stars indeed. May we all have the merit to always feel the love of Hashem, to understand how important we are for Him, how special each of us is. And as Rav Yossi tells me all the time, there is no replacement for any of us. We are all, one by one, really special in the eyes of Hashem. May you have an amazing Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.